Welcome to the Unlist. Today's video title kind of says it all. Hated fragrances. Now I know when I make any kind of statement like that, it's a unilateral statement, that I'm not saying everyone hates something or likes something, but generally considered liked or hated, blanket statements being what they are. This video is about fragrances that I perceive as generally being hated. Not by everyone on planet Earth. Mostly by people in the online fragrance community, which you and I know is a special subsection of people. Some very passionate people, some very knowledgeable people, and then some absolutely fucking batshit crazy people that have no business being on the internet at all. But you find those types in every niche community, since niche interest communities in general tend to, being as polite as possible, tend to bring the real weirdos out of the woodwork, right? Just when you think that there couldn't be anybody more obsessed with something than you find someone that's actually more obsessed than you are about something, and then there it goes, right? So, hated by the online fragrance community, not necessarily hated by the general public, because the irony is most of the fragrances that I name in this video that are generally hated by people in the community are very big selling fragrances. Very, very high selling, very well known. There's some correlation you can make if you want to be that guy. I try not to be that guy. Sometimes I am, but let's just humor that for a second. Very popular things by the mainstream tend to be hated by the more niche interest types, whether you want to say that's being a hipster or not. Oh, it's too popular and I'm too cool, I can't like the popular thing. Could be some of that. But then there's also the thing about overexposure. And a lot of these are hated just because of overexposure. And I personally know firsthand, having been on this planet for a long enough time, a lot of fragrances that were overexposed 20 or 30 years ago are actually kind of rare to find nowadays. And their reputation seems to improve as they become more scarce. And that leads us to the other thing that I've mentioned before about discontinuation, and how discontinuation can make masterpieces out of just about anything. Any basic drugstore fragrance from 30, 40 years ago, any mid-tier designer that was not a big seller 20 years ago, like your random Kenneth Cole thing, any niche fragrance that was kind of the outlier in the range. So if the brand is known for this kind of smell across the board, but then they make one that's different from the rest and that one doesn't really sell that well, that's the one that gets discontinued because you take a risk doesn't pay off, then off it goes. Same thing as a fragrance in general, as its obscurity increases and it recedes from public view, its reputation improves up until the point when it's actually discontinued. Then suddenly it becomes a legend, it becomes Godhead. And that's usually the people who discover it after the fact, right? After it's been made obscure or after it's been discontinued. People discovering it under that context think much more highly of it than people who remember when it first released, remember when it was popular, remember when everyone was using it, or remember when its initial reception was not great. If it, again, was an outlier fragrance, people didn't necessarily appreciate it when it came out. But the people making mountains out of molehills always see it differently. And I guess there's just some psychology wrapped in that. I can't really decipher that for you. I'm not a shrink, okay? But grasping at straws as is. However, with the hated fragrances, we're on the other end of that spectrum. We're not on the loved, venerated, worshipped. We're on the hated end. Usually very popular. Very popular. Sometimes just notorious. Maybe not a best-selling fragrance, but just highly notorious for one thing or another. So now that I've kind of given you the spiel, let's get started. Obviously, I can't make a hated fragrances video without mentioning this fragrance, which is currently the literal best-selling perfume of all time. Not just for women, not just for men, not just in the recent 10 years, but more bottles of this now exist on planet Earth than anything else out there. It's eclipsed Chanel No. 5. It's eclipsed a lot of things. I think the only perfume that may still have more total bottles sold, but may not have more bottles in existence, because those bottles get used up and thrown away. But I think the only fragrance with more total volume is going to be Acqua di Gio by Giorgio Armani. But Chanel No. 5 still holds the longest tenure of best-selling fragrance, you know. But how many bottles were moving in 1921 versus 2025, right? So it's all about scale. Perfume was not as popular 100 years ago. So having a best-selling title from even 70, 80 years ago, we're talking in numbers in the thousands, not millions. But since we've got more people on the planet now, and more people buying perfume now than there was back then, Sauvage has just kind of eclipsed everything. And that's what we're talking about. Good old Sauvage. I can say good old Sauvage because it's 10 years old now. So maybe it's not vintage. I wouldn't call it vintage, but I reserve that for 20 years. When you turn 20, you're vintage then. In a car sense, right? So I apply that logic, the automotive logic, I apply it to fragrances. Car can get antique tags in 20 years. Some states it's 25. So 20 or 25. But either way, 20 years, 25 years, you're vintage. I apply that to perfume too. So this is not vintage yet, but good old Sauvage. Why is it hated? That's easy. It's everywhere. It's inescapable. It's everywhere. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry wears it. Every person flipping burgers at McDonald's, every sales clerk ringing you up at Old Navy, everyone that walks past you in the mall, everyone getting into their car, out of their car, or into an elevator that you come across, people on buses, okay? Rich or poor, high and mighty, lowly, doesn't matter. Everyone is wearing this. Sauvage is the Acqua di Gio of this generation. Or if you want to go a little further back, Dracar Noir, or something like Curve for Men by Liz Claiborne, Fierce Cologne by Abercrombie & Fitch. All of those were massive, overrepresented fragrances when they came out, in the men's space at least. And Sauvage is that now, okay? So if you're old enough to have lived through when Dracar Noir was everywhere, when Curve was everywhere, when Tommy was everywhere, when Fierce Cologne was everywhere, okay, you get the point. If you're old enough to have experienced all of those different zeitgeists as they occurred, this is not news to you, okay? This is just another one of those, and it will pass in time, as they all do. Some take a little longer. I mean, Acqua di Gio is technically still selling pretty strongly, right? Now it's got multiple flankers to try and to maintain interest. Originally, the one fragrance by itself could maintain the interest, but now people want little wardrobes, right? You don't really have too many signature scent guys these days. So Acqua di Gio maintains its interest by having choices. Sauvage really just has Toilette, Eau de Parfum, Parfum, each one getting richer and sweeter, and then the elixir is woodier and such, but Sauvage basically follows the formula of Bleu de Chanel, where you've got Toilette, Eau de Parfum, Parfum, or what they call good, better, best. I don't really think it's good, better, best. I think this one is still the best one to have. It's the most iconic, emblematic of the range. And it's funny because the Eau de Toilette is the strongest projecting one. It's the one that lasts like all day on skin. I've never seen a need for performance to go higher in concentration. If anything, the higher ones are weaker. You know, they're sweeter, rounder, but they're weaker. So you'll lose something in that exchange. Personally, I think this is a very avant-garde fragrance. Clearly, it throws away a lot of perfume convention. It goes for very harsh, metallic, buzzy, sandpapery materials, like basically bergamot and lavender, and these very buzzy, woody amber musk choices that are really harsh and arid, which is why the commercials all feature Johnny Depp in the desert, right, playing guitar and standing next to like a muscle car or something. That imagery is actually pretty accurate to the fragrance, honestly. It's not aquatic, despite the blue bottle. It's not oceanic. It's not cool. It's not a cool fragrance. Not necessarily a spicy fragrance either. Just a dry, clean, woody fragrance. But woody in like a shop class kind of way, not in like a lush forest kind of way. So like I said, like sawdust, like sandpaper, and then the laundry musks and the lavender. So it's like dryer sheets in shop class. You're in shop class, you're planing a piece of wood, and then you're doing your laundry at the same time. That's Sauvage, and a lot of people seem to love it. But people in the online fragrance community really hate it because it's not a classic chypre, it's not a classic fougere, doesn't have oak moss or animalic musks, doesn't have a lot of naturals. It's very synthetic, very avant-garde, very technological fragrance. A cyberpunk, if you want to call it that. I've made my peace with it. I don't hate it. The only reason why I don't wear it more is just, again, it's everywhere. I can smell Sauvage all day long just by going outside. Just go outside. I smell Sauvage. So why do I need to wear it, right? There will come a day when my already 10-year-old bottle, this is for 2015, there will come a day when my 10-year-old bottle will become first edition, deep vintage, and all the vintage weirdos that obsess over stuff will obsess over this. And I'm waiting for that day, and then I can be like, look, I've got my first edition bottle from 2015, you know, the truest representation of the perfumer's intent, because it's the first one, or whatever. I don't care. It's Sauvage, right? But there it is. Very much hated. Do I agree with it? Sorta. I mean, I can understand the hate. I don't 100% align myself with it, but I can understand. Like, I get it, is what I'm trying to say. I get why it's hated. Maybe I don't hate it myself, but I get why it's hated. Obviously, another one, you know, sort of like Mounds and Almond Joy, right? You can't mention one without mentioning the other, and that's Bleu de Chanel. Now, is this hated as much as Sauvage? No, clearly not. Clearly not hated as much as Sauvage. And the reason why I think that is, Sauvage just kind of really takes the whole blue post-aquatic woody amber thing to an extreme, right? This tries to be more balanced because Jacques Polge was all about balance and all about measure. Every fragrance he ever made for Chanel during his tenure, starting with Antaeus all the way up until this, women's and men's, so we're including Coco in this conversation, we're including the Allure fragrances, all that stuff. He always tries to just apply the artistic value that Chanel started way back in the 20s with number 5 and all the Ernest Beau stuff of smooth, no rough edges, nothing that sticks out. Even though Antaeus is technically an animalic fragrance, it's a woody leather chypre fragrance, it is the smoothest. You compare it to Kouros, you compare it to anything else that was around in that era, one-man show, all those fragrances had rough edges. Kouros had the big swinging dick with the animalis note, and stuff like Oscar de la Renta was really floral. One Man Show had the big leather belt buckle from the Castoreum that was in it, and all the green notes. So they were all very, again, angular in some way. Antaeus was rounded, polished, smooth, and that kind of set the stage for everything else, all the way up into this. And this is, again, rounded, polished, smooth. Just a different kind of fragrance than anything else Jacques Polge had really done up until this point. This would be his last men's fragrance before he stepped down and his son Olivier Polge took over. The only thing about this is it's not a very original fragrance. You can tell that Jacques Polge was trying to make a high water mark in terms of sales. So he looked at what other brands were doing. I've made mention of this in other videos. He looking at Kenneth Cole Black, which is a Harry Fremont composition. He was looking at stuff that his son was doing for other houses like Bora Bora, which his son was a part of that brief. Just the way in general that those fragrances, both of those fragrances, Black more so than Bora Bora, but the way that they would use basically woody ambers and ambroxan and violet accords, and then would use citruses like grapefruit instead of bergamot, instead of lemon. Just the rounder, darker, not quite mandarin orange here, not quite tangerine, but just the grapefruit, the violet accords, the ambroxan, the woody ambers. Again, it's that post-aquatic blue smell, and Bleu de Chanel was just kind of built up on all that previous work, and then snuck in some lavender, snuck in some vetiver, made it Fougere adjacent, but not quite. But it's a very uninteresting fragrance. That's probably where the hate comes from. The hate comes from it being uninteresting. Because even though the other Chanel fragrances are not necessarily full of personality either, Antaeus has some personality, Egoist has some personality, but again, Chanel's not really known for that. That's more Dior's trick to do that, right? With the real gregarious, extroverted personality. Chanel stuff is always more, like I said, rounded, sophisticated. But this is kind of taking that roundness and sophistication to the furthest extreme, to almost being banal, right? Banality levels of that. And, well, people, I guess, wanted that. They don't want loud and obnoxious and gets your attention. Sometimes a guy just wants a fragrance to be that clean, smooth, fresh, polished kind of thing. Abstract. Doesn't remind you of any one thing in particular. Just kind of generic niceness. And do it to a high level, which Chanel always does everything to a high level, including their prices. They do their prices to a high level too. See? But yeah, and I get the argument for it being bland, right? You can see I haven't put a huge dent in my bottle, so I'm not wearing this like crazy either. And with the prices these things go nowadays, I can't really use a lot of it. I don't want to have to replace it. But again, don't agree with the hate, but I can understand the hate. It was a real, just a real stereotypical Chanel kind of release. And then to add insult to injury, Chanel is pulling a Paul Monsieur with this, where they're not backing away from it. Paul Monsieur was the only masculine they had from 55 until 81, so 26 years. 26 fucking years. No new men's fragrances. We are 15 years into this now. And we've had an eau de parfum, we've had a parfum, and now we have a l'exclusive, right? But they're all still within the same range. So there hasn't been a new range topping fragrance in 15 years. And that just kind of adds insult to injury with why people hate this. And again, I understand that. I can appreciate a dissenting opinion that I don't share. I don't hate it. Obviously, I own a bottle, but I understand why it's hated. I get it. Again, it's one of those things where I can meet with someone eye to eye on that, even if I don't agree with it. Now we are going to float over to Invictus. Ah, yeah. Ooh, I almost dropped that. Nice save, though. That was a close one. That's staying in. I'm not going to take that out, obviously. But, yeah, I almost lost the perfume there. But, cat-like reflexes saved the day. However, you didn't get to see it happen because my back was to the camera, but I just did a, like a whoop, 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 whoop thing. My bottle of Kipling here took a spill. but I caught it, so didn't get too far. Which is good, because it's a very rare, expensive fragrance, and if I break that, then I'm never going to get another bottle. So that came from a European friend of mine, which if I were to do that now, he probably couldn't even sell to me because tariffs and shit would get in the way. It would end up sitting in customs forever. So I got that while free trade was still a thing, right? So here we got Invictus. Another one that I understand the hate for this. I am fascinated by this fragrance's story, though. The story behind this fragrance, I've done a video on it. Okay, so I've done a video on this. The story behind this fragrance is kind of what really makes me appreciate wearing it, even though I don't, again, you see not a huge dent taken out of this. Don't wear it a whole lot, but this started off being more of a black olive accord fragrance, which actually, there's rumor that Black Caviar by Electimus is closer to the original brief for Invictus. Like, it was someone basically taking a mod from the Invictus brief and reworking it with a different perfumer and kind of taking it in a direction that was closer to the intent. But Electimus is not a brand I really care much for. Black Caviar is an interesting fragrance, but if you smell Black Caviar, its focus on black olive, you can kind of understand why that didn't stay with the brief and why Invictus took the direction it did. More commercial, more musky, more sweet, fruity notes up top. What we ended up getting with Invictus, though, was more in line with what had come before. And I've described Invictus as being like the love child between Amorous by Maison Francis Kurkdjian. Amorous owned the men's, obviously, and the previous year's Gucci Guilty. So take the original 2011 Gucci Guilty Pour Homme, the sweet fruity notes, the juniper berries, the patchouli, the clean musks, then take the sharp kind of musky, dry Tonka feeling with the tropical fruit notes that Amorous has, merge the two of those together, and then beefing it up with bay leaf notes, add in that waxy black olive accord buried way down. It's still in there, but now it's buried way down. So it's this strange mixture of fruity sweet with the shower gel, the bubblegum notes, then you go into the aromatics, then you go down into the musk and that sort of salty black olive faux ambergris accord with the musk. And it's actually a very strange fragrance, but that's okay, because apparently it's a strange that a lot of people like. And there have been 1 billion copies of this. Everyone has made a copy of this. I mean, To Me with the Awakened line, Urban Hero by Jimmy Choo, half of the Valentino Uomo Born in Roma range is some permutation of this. And even now, in 2025, 12 years later, they are still making copies of this. It's never ending. So it's another situation where, like with Sauvage, where I understand it's overexposed. It's greatly overexposed. And what makes it worse is that you don't know if you're smelling this or one of its clones. And then Versace has Hawas, right? And then there's also all the flankers, Invictus, Aqua, all three of them. Invictus Victory, Invictus Elixir. There's just 101 different ways now, commercially available, that you can smell like this. And it's just that thing where, is it Invictus? I don't know, I don't care. Just tired of smelling it. Me personally, again, this is another one like Sauvage where it's like, if I want to smell this, I just go outside. I just go outside and I will smell this at some point in my day on somebody. So that's why there's not a big dent in my bottle. There's not really a big dent in any of my bottles because I've got a lot of bottles anyway, but certain ones I hit on more than others. But I like it. I like what this is. I just don't, I understand the hatred. I get why people don't like it. So now we can talk about the next one in the list. And that one is going to be kind of an older selection, but Angel, Amen, as it's known now, by Thierry Mugler, 1994 release. This one is a fragrance that a lot of people hate on principle more so than on smell. It's funny. The other ones I've mentioned so far, it's usually the fact that it's overexposed, the fact that it's not an interesting smell, the fact that it's had tons of clones. People hate this because of the principle. And that principle is the gourmand. This fragrance and its older sister, just Angel, ushered in the gourmand genre. And everyone who hates sweet smells, they hate tons of vanilla, caramel notes, all that stuff that's now very pervasive, especially in men's fragrances, they always trace that back, rightly so, to this. Because this is where that started. And even though this is not super sweet compared to today's gourmands, this is not Stronger With You. This is not anything like that. This is not the Bad Boy or any of those kind of fragrances that are very heavily caramelized or whatever. There's actually a lot of patchouli in this, a lot of wood in this. It does have a coffee note. I kind of liken this fragrance to the smell of a Starbucks, but not just the coffee, the wooden floors, everything that is a coffee shop, not just the smell of the coffee itself. It is the smell of a corner barista, basically, in a bottle. And I like that personally. It's not something I wear in the summer, though. Obviously, when it gets fall, I'll be cranking on this a little more. But a lot of guys who hate gourmands, they hate sweet, they hate a lot of vanilla, again, caramelized notes, they point the finger at this, and that's why they hate this. And I understand. Again, I don't agree, but I understand. You know, it is the origin of the species, right? So, if you hate that species, then you got to hate the starting point. That's just logic. And one last one, another bit of an older selection, but you know, the fragrance that a lot of people also really like to hate on a lot. And you know, I understand, but again, it's like, I don't think it's as severe as people tend to make it out to be. But a lot of people really, really, really seem to hate this fragrance. And I will leave it here. And yes, I know I could mention Invictus, but Invictus is not really hated by the online fragrance community, so I can't really put that in the video necessarily. So it still has a very strong, very vocal cult following. So Invictus might be hated by people who are tired of smelling it out in public. You know, Invictus is kind of like the Jope of its generation, but way more expensive, I guess. But just in terms of the community, the way the community perceives it, Invictus is not really, it's always been a very flashpoint fragrance, but in terms of like just getting a lot of vocal hate, this one right here, 1 Million by Paco Rabanne. So Paco Rabanne gets two. Dior got one, Chanel got one, Mugler got one. Poor old Paco Rabanne gets two. This predates Invictus, of course, but what's weird is the flankers have a much better reputation than this does. Everyone seems to love the 1 Million Gold, or the Million, just called Million. They love the various other flankers, the Parfum, Privé discontinued, Lucky discontinued, But a lot of the flankers, really high reputation. A lot of the offshoot series, again, One Royal Night and other different ones. But the original 2008 still gets a lot of hate. And this one, I have a hard time actually understanding why. Because this isn't the first Paco Rabanne in a goofy bottle. I mean, Ultraviolet had a goofy bottle. Tenere back in the 80s had a goofy bottle, technically. You know, they've all had goofy bottles, except for the first one. It's not the first clubber either, okay? I mean, Lamal was back in 94, 95, big clubber as well. Before that, Lapidus, one of the early clubber fragrances. Lagerfeld Photo, early clubbers. Nico Sculpture, Yope, okay? All of those clubbers from a decade prior. They receive a good bit of love, you know, especially the discontinued ones, like Lagerfeld Photo. Everyone loves that. But for some reason, this became a bridge too far. Is it the gold bottle? The gold bar? I don't want to make it a cultural, racial thing, but a lot of rappers and hip-hop stars really got behind this fragrance. So I don't want to say racism necessarily, but it ticks the boxes, right? So a lot of people used to hate on Platinum Egoist too, because all the rappers in the 90s loved it because it was platinum, right? And platinum was popular back then. Platinum grills, platinum neck chains. So some of that, you know, whether you agree with me or not, may factor into why this one got hate when, like I said, no one cared about Ultraviolet as much. Is it a cultural thing? Yes, it's a very sweet fragrance, but there are a lot of very sweet fragrances that people love, like Eros. Eros is very loved in the community. This one, though, again, I can't quite point to why this is hated. So this one I'm going to leave a question mark. Maybe you guys can answer this for me. Why does this fragrance get so much hate when other fragrances very similar to it do not, right? Why does this one not pass muster when the other ones do? I'll leave that up to you. There you go, guys. There's a video of hated fragrances in the online fragrance community. Maybe I'll do a part 2 and name some more. Maybe I'll go for some older ones, because there was a lot of hate for Brut back in the day. I remember when folks hated on the Brut, so maybe I'll do a part 2 and do more vintage fragrances that were formerly hated. See how that goes. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.